All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Stamatakis Jr., and on behalf of the Victoria City Police Union and all candidates participating tonight, we would like to acknowledge and thank the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations communities, for allowing us to live, work, and play on their lands. We would also like to thank all the candidates for participating in this important discussion on policing and public safety in Victoria. Unfortunately, moderator Richard Zussman had a last-minute family health emergency and won't be able to join us tonight, and I will be moderating in his absence. Given the fact there were so much turnover in our Victoria Municipal Council, and there are so many new candidates, our hope is that this forum gives viewers the opportunity to understand the goals and perspectives of each candidate specific to policing. Victoria and its policing needs has undeniably evolved over the years, and City Council has a direct impact on the police department's ability to ensure public safety from a budgetary and resourcing perspective. The complexities include increased call loads related to supportive housing, the challenges of having high volumes of police membership on physical and mental health injuries, and the Victoria Police Department's challenges with recruitment and retention. We believe that the public safety and our officer safety is paramount to the successful growth of Victoria as a whole. So as such, it's our hope that you find this forum beneficial in voting, and regardless of the different perspectives on policing that exists in today's society, we all look forward to being inclusive and providing a safer community while ensuring a sustainable workforce for our officers. So without further ado, let's move on to the first stage of our forum, where each candidate will get a minute and a half to answer the same question. What role do you think the police should play in the community? In this first stage, there will be no opportunity for rebuttal between candidates, and is strictly focused on candidates explaining their perspectives on policing. However, there will be an opportunity for discussions in the second stage of the forum, where candidates will be separated into virtual groups, and each group will answer another specific question. So let's lead the conversation with Julia Alvarez. Julia, what do you think police's role should be in the community?
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I believe the police's role in our community is a vital one. It's super important for the police to engage our youth and our community as a whole. I value every role that the police does, from law enforcement to educating our youth, because sometimes they play a good role in our schools and high schools and junior highs. I do want to empower them to help with the problems that are going on downtown with the drug use and addiction, and to help the small businesses prevent all the theft that's going on. That's what and that's the biggest complaint that I heard from the business owners, was the crime in front of their stores, and the large amount of theft going on.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Jason Jones. Jason.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. Victoria Police Department has a very important role, and that is one, helping all age and all demographics. And in that, I'm fully supportive of the police responding to our grandmothers that have a stray dog in their backyard and needs some help with that. I'm full in support of the police helping educate students with their young bicycle trafficking and education programs. As well with their visiting the higher schools with their anti-drug programs and drinking programs, driving and drinking, drunken driving programs. And then I'm also really supportive and back of police being downtown, keeping our citizens safe while they're downtown at all hours. And for that, we need more police on the payroll and on the streets, because a lot happens on a Friday and Saturday night downtown, but there's still other areas of the city that needs representation and squad cars and all that closer at hand so that times are quicker. So yeah, police needs more funding and more public relations and understanding and support.
Thank you very much for that answer. Next, we have Stephen Hammond. Stephen, what role do you think the police should play in the community?
I believe they should play a role of safety and allowing people to feel safe, not just be safe. Right now, it's a job that's involved a lot of social services that must put a strain on the department. Well, in fact, it does put a strain on the department. And I think it puts a strain on the professional lives of the officers individually. I believe that the police have a role so that we have more peace of mind, that we know that if something goes wrong, if there's any criminal element or crime going on, that we can rely on them. And as a result of that, I know the police budget is a substantial part of the city, but the fact that our crime rates are as high as they are for violent and non-violent criminal offenses is the kind of thing that we must ensure that people feel safe and that they are safe. So it's to give them peace of mind. I also know that the police play a role in educating people, whether it is young people or anyone, about what it is that's acceptable and not acceptable behavior. Many years ago in Vancouver, I did a ride along with the police, and that was quite an eye-opener for me. And so I realize it's not an easy job, but I certainly support the efforts that the police are doing.
Thank you very much. Next, we have William Scott. William, what role do you think the police should play in our community?
I don't see William here with us this evening.
Okay. Sorry. Next, then we'll go right to Susan Kim. Susan?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the police aren't just a monolithic group. It's a lot of folks with diverse sets of talents and skills. And the idea of what the police does is just such a long list. It's really nebulous what safety means. And so the police are asked to take on so much. The way, what I believe police do in our community is do things like the really hard things that no one else can really do, that no one else is qualified to do, which is investigate things like serious crimes, murder, racism, hate crimes, white collar crimes, gender-based violence. But then also because they're the folks out on the streets, I feel like there's a really important role to play in terms of maintaining relationships between governing bodies and civilians on the ground. So yeah, and the other thing I really appreciate police do is drunk driver checks. I really appreciate keeping the road safe that way. I'll pass it on.
Excellent, thank you. Next, we have Krista Loughton. Krista?
Good evening, thank you so much. I think that the role that the police play in our city is preventing and solving crime. But they have inherited a lot of other issues that really should be taken on by upper levels of government. So in the recent Butler-LaPaird report that came out, the rapid investigation into repeat offending and random stranger violence in British Columbia, it highlighted the need to fund services like healthcare, housing, and access to food. And I think that because the provincial and federal governments have downloaded social services, particularly housing, onto municipalities, it's fallen onto the plate of the police unfairly. And we need to look into that. We need to be able to support the police. We have 25% of the police department off on PTSD and mental health leave, and that's not okay. We need to be able to make sure that the police are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and what they're so good at. And again, that's preventing and solving crime and dealing with any kind of situation where there's a weapon involved. But when it comes to those, I'm going to call them basic needs, like the bottom rung of Maslow, those basic physiological needs that people need that aren't being met, that results in behavioral issues that the police need support in order to combat that. And it's up to us to lobby, or lobby is probably not the right word, but to advocate to upper levels of government to get what we need in place in our city, so that the police aren't overtaxed in the way that they are right now. And I just want to thank the police department, the police force for all that they do. And if I am elected to council, I look very forward to working with you on these complicated issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krista. Next, we have Derek Pinto. Derek, what role do you think the police should have in the community?
I think it's the role that they've always had, provide safety and security for all residents. And that's really, I think it's just as simple as that.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Susan Simmons.
She's
I
not
don't
here.
believe she's here either.
I just admitted her, so I hope we can come back to her if she did. I know she was going to be attending late. She is helping out in an important role with Special Olympics, so she was going to be attending late, but we can come back to her. Tom Braybrook. Tom?
Thanks, Tom. I just unmuted myself there. First of all, I'd just like to thank you and the VCPU for hosting this event and giving us all the opportunity to present our views to the electorate. A general statement right up front is the VicPD provide a very valuable service to the community, and they're an essential part to any safety and wellness plan for Victoria. And if elected, they would have my full support. But having said that, I think it's important to note that there are a few issues that are clearly having an impact on the members of the VicPD Police Department. First of all, Victoria carries an outsized burden in terms of service load. As the core police service, it should be obvious that the VicPD deals with more events that are related to tourism, interregional migration, and the issues that originate in the unhoused population. And I think the second point, and probably the solution to most of these, would be funding. It all comes down to dollars and cents. Most of these difficulties, I think, could be addressed by following the recommendations in the province's report on transforming policing and community safety in British Columbia, and instituting a funding model that is based more on local needs, health and social supports, and the geography of the service delivery area, rather than simply relying on population as a funding model. And thirdly, I think it's important to realize that what we really need is an increased coordination and integration across multiple jurisdictions, the police, health services, mental health services, and social services. All of those are at a provincial level. And I think that type of coordination would go a long way towards solving most of the issues we have. And if I can just reiterate, the police can't do this alone. They need the support of council, they need the support of the community, and they need proper funding and other supports to ensure that they can continue to do the good job that they already do in the community.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we have Sandy Janssens. Sandy, what role do you think the police should have in the community? Sandy, you there?
Hi, sorry about that.
That's okay.
This is why I'm getting into politics. Technology is not my forte.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. What I wanted to say is, quite simply and traditionally, police are the enforcement branch of our civil society structures. So you have the legislative branch, which makes the laws. But quite frankly, laws are meaningless if they're not enforceable. And there's also no deterrent. So we have to have an empowered police force that can actually do their job of police enforcement. Now, I realize in latter years, you've seen police taking on a community collaborative role. And I would suggest that we look at places that have done this more effectively. So, for example, there's ERT, emergency response teams, and ACT, assertive community teams, that work well in collaboration with police to try to solve some of these more difficult, complex issues, such as homelessness, which everyone seems to agree is not a criminal issue, but more of a mental health issue. But however, it does invite vectors of criminality into those vulnerable groups. So there has to be a collaborative effort between ERT, emergency response teams, who are well and specialized counselors, and let's say a branch of the police that are very community oriented and abreast and well knowledge of what's happening in the community. And we pair those together so that we have real action. And unfortunately, what we've seen is there's been a breakdown in our traditional system, and the police have not been able to do their job, which is enforcing the law, which is enforcing laws. And apparently something like the rule of law, which we are all protected under, has become co-opted and become a dirty slogan for some reason. And I think that if we bring it back to basics, but try to collaborate with that community approach, we will see something going forward, because empirically, and according to the SCI, the Serious Crime Index, Victoria has one of the highest crime indexes of all the municipalities. So no matter how many people want to argue against that about domestic crime or soft crime is down, hard criminal crime is up. People see it in the streets. People experience it. They don't feel safe to go down certain streets. I live in Harris Green, a few blocks from Pandora. I shop at the Save On Foods right there as a single person. So I witness this every day. And it's unfair to try to negate or to manipulate those statistics to try to tell the public that they're imagining that they feel unsafe. They feel unsafe because it's true. And the reason we're unsafe is because whatever has been done by the current, I don't want to sling anyone, but the current people who have had some power over this and decision making, they've allowed it to deteriorate into a lawless, unsafe, and insecure environment for everybody, not just the unhoused homeless individuals, but for the broader community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Ben Isaac. Ben, what role do you think they should have in the community?
Thank you, Tom, and thanks to the BCPU for convening this important discussion. I think the role of police is to keep the community safe, and that's why City Council for the last decade or 2 decades has always invested in policing with an increase at least at the rate of inflation. And I think it is important to ensure there's adequate resources to keep the community safe. I think policing should focus on responding to crime, investigating crime, and levying charges under the criminal code. And then the onus is on the province to prosecute those charges. I think our police have unfortunately been negatively impacted by being called upon to respond to health emergencies, which our officers are not properly trained or equipped to respond to. And as a result of that, they're suffering psychological injuries, they're on stress leave, and it impacts individuals and their families and means that the resources are even more stretched. And we have seen the province and the feds failing to exercise their responsibilities of ensuring that adequate health services, particularly mental health and addiction services, are deployed on the streets so that our officers can focus on the job that they're trained and equipped and very.
I'm not sure if anyone else is having any technical
Step up
issues, but
and deliver those services. Thank you.
yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ben. Next, we have Emmanuel Parenteau. Emmanuel, what role do you see the police having in the community?
Can you just unmuted? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Perfect. Well, the technical term is you guys uphold the 5 common law duties. A less technical thing to say would be that you guys prevent crime. Now, I'm going to use layman's terms because that's the kind of guy that I am. So you guys put a barrier between us, the common citizen, and the harsher edges of reality. A lot of people don't know much about what the police do. I have a lot of social contact with police. I train jiu-jitsu with police. I treat police in my clinic. I have a very good understanding, boots on the ground understanding of what you guys go through. The reason I don't have to see the aftermath of suicides, murders, fatal car accidents, severe assaults, etc., is that you guys do it on my behalf. It's a high stress job. You guys are unfortunately pressed into service as social workers sometimes, mental health experts. It's part of on the job training you guys have to deal with. But it's traditionally been a layer of reality that has to be there because most people could not handle seeing in a year what you guys see in a week. So at this point, to break it down to its most common practical element, you guys are the immune system between the community's mental health and reality.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And lastly, we have Jeremy Caradona. Jeremy, what role do you think the police should have in the community?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to the VCPU for having us here today. I'm really excited to be able to speak with all of you. I actually come from a family of police officers. My grandfather, my uncle, my cousin, all are or were police officers in the NYPD.
Oh.
And so I grew up with a healthy appreciation for the police, and I've had a chance to study policing and think about its role in society. And I want to go back to the three core issues you brought up at the very beginning in your opening comments, the three core issues that Vic PD is facing. One is an overwhelming number of calls about housing and homelessness. And the second is the mental health of your staff and your officers. And then the third is the retention of staff. And if you think about that, that boils down to two core issues. The first is that we've asked the Vic PD to take on too much, and that leads to burnout. And the other issue is that we're dealing with a housing crisis. And the housing crisis affects everyone from the unhoused to, I would imagine, plays a role in the retention of staff. I don't know that for sure, but I would not be surprised if one of the issues, because I hear it from employees of many different industries, from BC Ferries to services to et cetera, everyone is being priced out of this city. So we have this housing crisis and we have this mental health crisis that is all falling onto the police. My thoughts align with some of the other speakers today, which is that we've asked the police to do too much. The police have become the blanket social services go-to in our society. And the reality is that the department is not trained, nor do they want to, for the most part, deal with things like mental health calls, addictions calls, homelessness calls. I think we can all agree that the police does not have the ability to house people. It's not their role. It's unfair to expect the police to somehow solve homelessness. So what I would like to see is a robust investment in mental health, addictions, and other social services so that we can actually free up the police to deal with their core strength, which is actually keeping people safe and dealing with violent crime. And if we think about 4 different kinds of calls that the police might get on a daily basis, a mental health crisis call, an overdose call, or let's say a fender bender between 2 vehicles, and then the third or the fourth one would be a violent crime. Really, it's the fourth one that the police should be focusing on. We shouldn't have to send the police out to deal with someone who has an overdose. We shouldn't have to send the police out to deal with someone who's had a fender bender even. A civil servant can take down a report. We don't need an officer and resources dedicated to something like that. So what I would like to see, and what I will do as a counselor, is support our police by allowing them to focus on their core strengths. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And that concludes the first stage of the forum.
Oh,
For the second,
Tom.
oh, sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thank you, Tom. It's appreciated.
Yeah, please.
First off, yeah, thank you, Tom, and the VCPU for hosting this event. Hello to the folks tuning in. My name is Jordan, and public safety is a top priority of mine. I think the role of the police is to first and foremost provide protection for residents to detect and prevent crime and maintain law and order. They are in charge of keeping our parks and streets safe at all times, and they act as our safety net in our time of need. Additionally, police serve as role models who lead by example in their professionalism, compassion, and sense of duty towards their community. I think the police force, Vic PD, does work of 5 municipalities, and I'm thankful for their services every day. They have my respect. My concern is, however, that our police resources are stretched so thin for various reasons that Vic PD can't respond to crime as fast as I think they would like to. So my fear is that this will lead to a rise of vigilantism throughout the city, where civilians take matters into their own hands and are putting themselves in dangerous situations. But responding to crime and disorder is not the role of civilians. That role belongs to the police, who are trained and capable of standing between civilians and harm's way. So let's leave the crime fighting to them. I propose we elect a council that is willing to elect a council that is willing to do its role in supporting Vic PD, so that they can fulfill their role to the best of their ability. A strong police force is a reflection of good governance because a municipal government that works collaboratively with its police force will lead to a safer, more prosperous community for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so now we'll move to the second stage, in where we'll be dividing the candidates into 3 groups. And each candidate will have a minute and a half to answer the same question within their group. After all candidates have provided their answers, there will be an open discussion period where each candidate will have another minute to express a direct rebuttal against other candidates' proposals. So just to outline the groups, group 1 will be Julia Alvarez, Stephen Hammond, Jason Jones, William Scott, Susan Kim. Group 2 will be Krista Loughton, Derek Pinto, Jordan Quitzow, Susan Simmons, and Tom Braybrook. Lastly, group 3 will be Sandy Janssens, Ben Isaac, Jeremy Caradona, and Emmanuel Parenteau. So group 1, your question is, the Victoria Police Department has an increased call load related to supportive housing facilities and homelessness issues. What do you propose should be done to help this? If you'd like me to ask the question again, by all means, just ask. Julia Alvarez, if you'd like to lead us off, you have a minute and a half to answer. Hi, Julia, are you there? Can you hear me?
Okay, now.
There you go.
Sorry. No, 'cause
That's okay.
my mouse wasn't working that well.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, you bet. The Victoria Police Department has an increased call load related to supportive housing facilities and homelessness issues. What do you propose should be done to help address this?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the weight could be bared on just the police alone. If anything, they need assistance with social workers or psychologists. It's not really even the police's sole responsibility. Only if there's a crime taking place or somebody is, gone off the handle, or they're having some kind of severe reaction of some sort, a violent reaction, that's when they have to be called. But and it's unfortunate that so much rests on the police shoulders. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Stephen Hammond, you're next. You have a minute and a half. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Nope, I think it's good, Tom. Thanks.
You bet.
If you go to my website, votestephenhammond.ca, I put some of the stats on an article that I wrote for the election about the fact that we not only have high crimes, but we also have more call outs around the supportive housing. And it was interesting because for purposes of privacy, when I was asking the police department, they didn't say exactly what it was, but you already said that it is. And as a matter of fact, when I asked for example, they recognize that. I'm a supporter of housing first. It is, you're going to help a person who is homeless when you're going to help them out when they have a roof over their head. And so that goes a long way, but it doesn't deal with everything. And so in and around those places where the province has every right to do it, we have no say on the matter. We can try to influence it. When I say we, the city and previous city councils and future city councils, we can try to ask them to be more careful where they are putting it. And we also should be asking them for some more supports within those facilities. The difficulty is I can't imagine that the previous or this existing council or other people haven't already asked for these kind of things. But as a result of that, there is one area of the jurisdiction we do have, and that is the protection of the neighborhoods around that. When I was a person who was speaking out about the tent city in the at the courthouse, council did respond when the mayor asked for protection in that neighborhood. And that's
Vote 10 more seconds. Vote 10 more seconds, just so you know, for your time.
Thank you very much. And so I say that this is a role that we've got. if we have to come up with extra finances to do that, it's important to protect the community.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jason Jones. Jason, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Sure. So the Victoria Police Department has an increased call load related to supportive housing facilities, homelessness issues. So what do you propose that should be done to help address this issue?
Well, we need more funding for the police. We need more police so that the rotation is lighter on the demands are lighter on the officers on the streets. As well as we need to understand and have my understanding of how often they're called, as well as the support that the locations most likely require. So as often most of these locations have repeat offenders, or situations, so we need to have social worker and police there. So it will be easier if they are on call or they know what situation they're going into. So it needs to be a little more mapped out. But the big thing is for me would be more boots on the ground and more rotation so that they're not burnt out as much.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. I know William Scott wasn't here earlier. William, I still see, so we'll move on. Susan Kim, would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay,
The way that the question was phrased, it said, what do you propose to do about what are functionally housing facilities and homelessness issues? And so the question really is about housing. And then there's that piece around how police relate to that. So, I mean, it's no surprise. There's a shortage of housing in the city, let alone affordable housing. And so when we talk about issues like the unhoused population, we also need to think about folks who are chronically homeless or underhoused because housing is just monetarily out of reach. And so we need to address pieces like poverty, infrastructure, making sure that folks are taken care of. And so when we talk about things like a housing first approach, yes, we can provide supportive housing, 4 walls and a roof, but are we also providing the actual programming and the supports and the boots on the ground of folks like social workers and the PAC teams? And when we're talking about how there's a disproportionate number of calls that the police are facing, it's because these calls should not be going to the police. The police have much more important things to be doing. And so if we adequately set up the systems in place to have housing, infrastructure, social workers, and address the hierarchy of those needs, let alone even things like bus passes and distributing these houses in a way that's regionally distributed, we're actually helping the police address the bigger problems that the city is facing. Thank you.
thank you very much. Well, given the fact that William is not here, that concludes everyone in group 1 and having the opportunity to answer that question. So in the next stage, Julia, you have 1 minute to express any rebuttal or concerns you have with some of the other candidates. If you'd like to go ahead. Julia, how do you feel about some of the answers that others gave?
I pretty much agree with everybody's answer. I think we all are in agreement that the police need help. It can't, these calls can't be just dealt with the police alone. They need support from mental health professionals like psychologists and social workers. I'd like to see what one of the people that I was canvassing, they told me about one incident that they had where they had to remove somebody that was overdosing, and actually they were overdosed and actually no, sorry, they actually were removing someone that was schizophrenic. It's just that this person lives in a Burnside Gorge, and they had many incidences where people are overdosing in front of their house, but somebody in the back of the house had a schizophrenic problem, and they were being escorted out, and somebody came with a social worker, and the police were in plain clothes. And I thought that was really helpful. I thought that was ideal because then because the police presence can be very intimidating, right? So if somebody came in police clothing, in civil clothing, that would help, turn the severity of the problem down. And it was just more calm that way.
Okay,
So I pretty much agree with what everybody said.
thank you, Stephen. Stephen Hammond, do you agree with everybody?
I don't know that I necessarily disagree, but, and I guess it's more exciting if we have disagreements of some kind. I get concerned when people are afraid to talk about crime. And there's many people who, if you dare to bring up that we have a crime issue in the city, well, every city does, but I think ours is proportionally higher than what it should be. Of course, the origins or the where you find so much crime is from poverty. You find it from mental health issues. You find it from addictions. But at the same time, until we cure all of those things, and I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future, then we have to deal with the crime. I'm a big brother with the Big Brothers Association, and that mom who's gone back to school. She was wanting to get her son a bike from some money that someone gave her, and the kid is terrified that his bike is going to be stolen. And so the thing is that we must ensure that the community feels that they're safe. And if that means sometimes we have to increase the police presence in order for people to be safe and feel safe, then we've got to do that. And I know a lot of people would like to reduce those numbers by the police, but that won't help when someone's calling 911 with some issue that's going on and they say, look, I'm sorry, but social services are looking after some other big issues. And I know that no one's saying that in a simplistic way, but we have to be very, very careful that we are giving the proper supports. And if it means that we have to get into some other area of protection that, let's say, isn't as intense as the police, I know that there are other jurisdictions who have that. I'm not an expert, but I certainly would be open to saying, are there some areas where you've got around supportive housing where you can give some other kinds of protections that still would make people feel safe and still would be a deterrent?
Thank you. Jason, any comments, concerns on anyone's points of view?
No, we're all pretty well in the same boat here. And that is that the police need assistance. They need more numbers. They need more rotation. They need backup considering different avenues of enforcement and interaction with the community that we're speaking of. And so, yeah, so all that can be added really is that we need to actually make this happen rather than just talk. There's been enough talk and talk and talk. And we need a council that actually backs the police rather than letting what's been happening the last few years. And it's ridiculous, and we need to change that. That's all.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Susan, Kim, last words on any concerning points on group one?
Thank you. So it was mentioned earlier during some of the intro round that there's a real issue with funding. For me, seeing how much of the city budget goes into police, I think is actually also testament to how small the city budget is, right? We actually don't have the geographic base large enough to have a large enough tax base to fund the city and the services it needs to be providing. And that includes all of the downtown core service providers, which is why I'm really interested in seeing a regional approach to housing so that we can just distribute the load as well as work for, I'm sure this is on people's mind, regional police service. And in so doing, also have a stronger voice at the provincial and federal tables to get the actual fire hose of money that we need to support folks in housing and also support folks who are working in the police services so that they're paid adequately for what they're doing and don't have to go on stress leave. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes group one. So now we'll move on to group two. So group two's question is, the Victoria Police Department currently has just over 20% non-deployable due to occupational stress injuries, physical injuries, medical leave, training, and other factors. So what can the city of Victoria do to support police members in their roles? First, we'll go to Krista Loughton. Krista, you have a minute and a half to answer. Hi, Krista, are you there? I see her there.
I was having an issue unmuting there. My apologies. I think what the city of Victoria can do to support police is work on, you know, some of the issues that came up in the staff report from the end of December last year. Some of the officers were complaining that the dynamic inside the building were harder than those on the street, and we need to look at ways to help senior management or to connect senior management with the police to support officers in that way. And maybe it is just having more mental health and well-being training going on inside the police department itself between officers and senior staff. I also think that over the pandemic, things have been excruciatingly hard. There was a lot that the police had to take on from the hotels that were purchased for the unhoused. And I know this kind of leaks over into the question that we just had, but there are so many things that could be happening in those hotels that would leave the police right out of it. For instance, restorative justice. For instance, a 24/7 counselor in those buildings. So when there is conflict between the people being sheltered and the staff, or between the people being sheltered with one another, that the police don't have to be called. There's actually other staff there that can deal with that. The other thing that happens is if someone is misbehaving in those buildings, they are either put on a 24/7 bar or evicted, and that can cause problems. So the police are just being called for all these incidental things that really should be dealt with by something.
About 10 more seconds.
Inside that building. And the staff there, they couldn't find staff. So they're young people working at $18 an hour. It's just not right. You know, we have to work with the province on making things operate better there so the police aren't taxed with that.
Okay. Thank you, Krista. Next, we have Derek Pinto. You have a minute and a half to answer the question. The Victoria Police Department currently has just over 20% non-deployable due to occupational stress injuries, physical injuries, medical leave, training, and other factors. What can the city of Victoria and its councillors do to support police officers in their roles?
First off, I'd say that I agree with a lot of what Krista said. However, it was somewhat frustrating for me to hear some of the responses I was hearing among the first group. I'm probably the only candidate who has lived and worked in soup kitchens and clothing rooms, Edmonton or Regina. I've broken up fights at the 9 to 10 club here in Victoria. We only call the police as a last resort when things are really spiraling out of control. And I appreciate so much when the police show up and save the volunteer workers in these shelters, in the soup kitchens, etc. And we need the resources for the police to be able to show up. But at the same time, the police need to be able to show up to other acts of crime. So we've had, for example, in front of my house, there was a person removing the manhole cover on a weekly basis. I ended up chasing the fellow. I caught him one night and I ended up chasing him down the street because it's a serious hazard. We need more police patrols as well to make people feel safe. I think that the current council wasn't giving the police force the respect that they deserve. And I think that's where it starts. I respect the role of the police in providing everyone with safety in the community. And it doesn't matter rich or poor or whatever your background. I believe that has happened. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jordan Quitzow. You have 1.5 minutes to answer.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I think the first thing you need to do is simply recognize that our police are overburdened and they are facing burnout. And, you know, I don't have the same experiences that our police face. You know, I really don't. So I can't really speak to the what they see every day. I am good at a council, so if you know, I would consult with them and see what they want to have done, and then try and implement that at the decision-making table. That said, I also do have some ideas to bring to the table. You know, potentially more bylaw positions that can handle some of the you know, less serious instances that occur throughout the city that they can deal with, take that off the police's plate. And I think, you know, we all talk about a regional police force, but I don't think to, you know, get more municipalities to have their police join us in the downtown core, not a lot of people talk about how to actually make that happen. Because we do know that the surrounding municipalities don't really want to amalgamate police forces with us. That means we need to go directly to the province. So whoever's elected on council, I highly recommend that we, you know, collect the data of when we do, you know, combine our efforts with the regional municipalities, and then present that as a case to the provincial government, and essentially make it a no-brainer for the provincial government to amalgamate the police forces here in Greater Victoria. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Next, we have Tom Braybrook. Tom, you have 1.5 minutes. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good, Tom. Thanks. Well, I think you've heard some pretty good answers already. I think most people realize that it's all coming down to the extra burden that the Vic PD shoulder compared to other police services in the area. It would be very interesting to compare your statistics relative to Vic PD, relative to the other forces in the area, to see how they compare. I have a feeling that the stress and all the action that the Vic PD get that others don't, due to the various factors we've already discussed that lead to these issues. So one answer obviously was moving towards a regional policing model rather than just having Vic PD shoulder the whole burden. The other idea, of course, is moving to more of a community policing model that would allow the police to do more police work and possibly bring in peace officers or civilians to take some of the lighter load, which I think is what Jordan was just referring to allow police to back off from some things that they don't really need to be attending and let them focus more on their core responsibilities. Of course, the problem there is you never know which situation is going to escalate into something where you need a police officer. And I guess the last thing would be, you know, we're starting to roll out teams that are like co-response teams so that police can provide backup to health professionals and mental health professionals that are being used as a first line of response when a situation isn't escalated to the point where they need police, so that the police don't have to move in and do that. So by sharing the responsibilities, I think you'd be able to lighten the load on the police, and that would free them up to do what they're trained to do. And I think that would go a long way to relieving the stress. As far as training goes, the only way you can increase training is to increase funding. And then again, I would say Vic PD is underfunded relative to the burden they carry.
Thank you. Now, before we get to the next stage where you all get a minute for rebuttal and comments, I thought it would be important to give perspective in terms of how the membership functions. And if I could make the analogy, a high performance vehicle is capable of revving at a very high RPM. However, a high RPM sustained at a very long time can only be sustained for a very long time. And so I leave you with that before we continue on to the next stage, where we're going to go back to Krista, and how you each feel about each other's comments and about what actually can be done and what should be done for Victoria city councillors and the city of Victoria to assist our members. Krista, do you have any comments in regards to anyone else's
Yeah,
comments?
I
Answers?
do. I've been campaigning very heavily on the basic physiological needs being met of, and when we talk about public safety, we really are in many ways talking about an issue of housing, talking about an issue of mental health. And without those physiological needs in place, like the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, then the mental health issues fall, everything gets worse, everything gets exacerbated. So Jordan was saying we need more bylaw, and I can understand the logic of that. However, I think before we put more bylaw into that situation, we actually need to look at meeting the physiological needs of people, which includes sleep, a safe shelter, a safe place to be. And we don't have enough shelter spaces, and some of those shelter spaces aren't safe. And we really need to rethink how we need to create designated spaces for people to be, and it needs to be dealt with regionally. And the province and possibly even the federal government need to be involved in that, but the province for sure, BC Housing. And we need supports from Island Health as well. I really think we just have to go back to 1940s Abraham Maslow and meet those physiological needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek, anything to add in regards to comments or rebuttal against some of your candidates' comments?
I really appreciate what Tom had to say. Sorry, Tom? Yeah. Is it Tom?
Yeah, it is Tom.
Yeah,
Berger.
Tom, sorry, yeah. And I guess what I would add is it kills me when I see a police officer attacked in Banfield Park, or when the robbery occurred and at the bank and in Saanich, and the police officers show up and rescue the hostages. And I see all kinds of online comments about how the police were too aggressive or they shouldn't have done anything, things like that. We need the citizens of this community, not just the council members, but the citizens of the community need to back up the police in their work. And I think that would go a long way in making the police officers feel safe to do their job, feel that they can go ahead and protect the people of Victoria without getting all kinds of negative comments and criticism.
Thank you. Jordan, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I guess to the people tuning in, you've heard a lot of good solutions from each of the councillor candidates, and I think that's what we should be focusing on. There isn't just one solution that's going to solve all of our problems. So, I really like how Krista was addressing like the root issue, addressing people's physiological needs. I like what Derek was saying about more education and community support for our police. And to what Tom was saying, if we don't have the answers, let's look elsewhere, see what other municipalities are doing. And if it's doing well and working well for their police force, then let's not reinvent the wheel and let's just do what they're doing and bring it here. So I guess for voters, I think you'll be in good hands for the next city council. I think everybody here is very passionate about ensuring that our police are well looked after. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now we will move on to group 3. So group 3. Oh, I apologize. Tom, I didn't give you an opportunity. How could I forget the other Tom? Go ahead.
Oh, I hope it wasn't me making a face that caused you to do that. Well, Tom, again, everybody brought things back around to causes that are causing the incidents with the police. But I think really anything that we do going forward, I think I have an opinion, everybody has an opinion, but I think it's essential that if we really want to deal with these issues, that we ask the members of the police force what they think needs to be done. Because as smart as we all are, we're not there, we're not on the ground. And I think involving the members of the Vic Police Union in these discussions because they're right there. They know far better than we do what's going on. And any solution that we provide for these particular issues can only be effective if there's buy-in and input from the members of the police union. And I think that's vital. All our ideas are all good, but there's more input than we need. And I think that's really a key source.
Thank you. We really look forward to addressing this issue because this is a very big one for us. Next, we'll move on to group 3. Group 3, your question is, in Statistics Canada 2021 Crime Severity Index, Victoria was identified as having the highest rate of severe crime in the capital region and the highest for municipal police departments in BC. So what are your plans to help address this? Sandy Janssens, you have a minute and a half.
Hi there. Well, this is where action needs to be taken. And what I'm hearing from my candidates is a lot of flowery garble. I mean, I'm hearing Krista say psychological needs need to be met. Safety, they need to sleep. We don't have enough shelters. And the question I would put back to Krista is how? We all know this. This is a synopsis. These are very nice words. These are platitudes, but people need action. So we're going to have to take action to bring down our crime statistic. And what that means is taking real action, not just talking about it, not just flowery platitudes and nice big words. So the first thing we're going to have to do is take action. So we're going to have to enact and empower the team in collaboration, very well thought out in a compassionate and dignified way with an ERT team. Similar, I would say, again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's look at places that have done this. I was in Edmonton, and I can echo Derek Pinto's words because I lived in Edmonton for over 20 years. And at one point, I'm not sure if you are aware, or the other, my fellow candidates, that they had a large encampment that took over the baseball field in downtown Edmonton. And at some point it got to, of course, you know, the vulnerable individuals, and we feel for them, but it is not compassionate. It is, I actually will pledge, or I challenge any one of the fellow candidates here who thinks that it's compassionate to move people from tents onto hard surfaces and to put heat lamps. And if you put heat lamps, you are facilitating the problem. You're going to go from an encampment, a few tents, which is what we've seen under the old city council, to an encampment. And what you're going to have, according to one of my other council members who's from Lebanon and via Palestine, is a refugee camp. And then we're going to have more pressure on police responding to the homeless situation, which they shouldn't be. So this is a lot to unpack, but I really, really wish I could hear more from my fellow candidates about action and substantive actions. And I'm going to start with number 1, empower the police, enact the police, make a plan, do it in 30 days. If you elect me on council and some of the other people here, and for God's sakes, people, I beseech you, do not elect a council that only is an echo chamber of the old council. It's the same old, same old. I think you know who they are. Please, for the love of God, do not enact them, because if you vote them in, you're going to have refugee. I've been in the military. You're going to have them. So I challenge all the female candidates out there, Krista Loudon, Ms. King, and Anna King, if she's there, please come down, and we're going to do it military style. I've tented in Wainwright in -25. And if you think it's compassionate and you want to put heat lamps, which can be weaponized, please come on down. And I was recruited by the Edmonton police, so I challenge these ladies to come down with me. And we're going to tent, we're going to camp, as they say, downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Next, we have Ben Isaac. Ben, would you like me to repeat the question, or?
And thank you. It's an excellent and important question. I think we need to start from a recognition that we're not, unfortunately, going to be able to police our way out of poverty and homelessness and addictions and mental health crises, and that the solutions are more challenging than simply augmenting the police budget at a rate greater than inflationary increases. The province has taken a very tiny tentative step in the right direction. If we look at the Summit Care Home on Hillside Avenue near Quadra, that facility was built by the Capital Region with 320 beds that were intended for seniors managing dementia. But the province, responding to advocacy from City Council and others, has designated 22 of those beds for people managing addictions and mental health issues. And that's what's called complex care housing with supports. And we need substantially more than 22 of those beds if we're going to deal with the crisis on places like the 900 block of Pandora Avenue, and a lot of the street level disorder that our officers are being overwhelmed with. And in tandem with those beds of complex care housing, we need more alternative responders on the streets. We need social workers, psychiatric nurses, and we need an amalgamated regional police force so that residents and taxpayers in Oak Bay, North Saanich, Metchosin are contributing towards the costs of providing adequate policing as well as adequate alternative responses on the streets of our downtown.
Thank you very much, Ben. Next, we'll move on to Jeremy Cardona. Jeremy?
Can't wait for this.
Well, I'm glad you can't wait because I'm about to share some insights with you.
Is it more platitudes, Jeremy?
Yeah, yeah, I like your blank wall. It's really beautiful back there, by the way.
Thank you. I love your.
So what's really interesting is that if you actually take a look at the crime severity index and the actual crime that we're facing in this area, and people are welcome to look at the data. I'm just looking at it myself right now. It's on vicpd.ca. It's on the VicPD's website. What's really interesting is that violent crime has been more or less flat for the last several years. What's gone up is property crime and what is termed social order crime or social order calls and assist calls. So social order would relate to things like homelessness, mental health addictions, and assist would actually be assisting emergency services. And then property break-ins and theft and that sort of thing. And I've actually had things stolen off my property, and it's a real problem and it's a real hassle. And in fact, I spoke with a voter over on the 1100 block of Caledonia by Fernwood Coffee, who's been broken into 5 times in the last couple of years. So these are clearly issues. But we also have to take a really close look at what kinds of crime is happening in Victoria. A lot of it seems to stem from poverty, from unaffordability, from the fact that people can't find housing. And again, I mean, we're all sort of sounding like a broken record here, but mental health, addictions, and well-being calls are completely overwhelming the VicPD and making it so that they actually don't have the ability to focus on violent crime and crimes that really should be the focus of policing. One of the things that happened today was there was an announcement down at the legislature from the province that a new program has been created called the Peer Assisted Care Team, PACT, which is sort of like the ACT team that someone mentioned a moment ago. And the PACT team, I would imagine all of us on this call will agree that this is a step in the right direction. And essentially what's going to happen is that mental health workers will be working with police to intervene in calls that really are not the bailiwick of the police. They are the bailiwick of clinical counselors, street nurses, and other mental health workers to take more of the burden off of the police. So that's what I'd like to see, is more of a move in that direction so that the police can partner with social services. So going back to Sandy's challenge for all of us to say, what's tangible here? Well, I think PACT is a real tangible step in the right direction. And so I think we as the City of Victoria should support the province and Island Health and move in that direction.
Thank you, Jeremy. And last for group 3, Emmanuel Parento. Emmanuel, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm good.
Sure.
So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Go
Perfect. Yes, as far as there's a multiple way to handle, I mean, the crime demographic is essentially stemming mainly from the homeless demographic. I've spoken with police, shelter workers, etc. We don't have enough staff within, the VicPD has been so stretched thin that I know that you guys have had to lower what's called the minimum officer ratio. In other words, on any given night, there used to be 14 or 15 minimum officers out on patrolling. Now you've got to, I think you guys have had to lower it down to 12. And then now there's limited time for vacation as well for you guys. And if any job in the world that needs their actual time off secured, it is the police officer, to prevent quitting for mental health purposes, etc. And there's a much higher rate of you guys getting leave for injuries than people realize. Because besides the major injuries we hear about, I know that you guys are consistently getting injured on the job. So complex care facilities, the ACT system that's in Edmonton right now, or the ERT, the encampment response teams, like the PACT structure that Jeremy was talking about, those things are great. But when you guys don't have enough police to have any school liaison officers for the last 4 years, when you guys have had to drop your vacation time, the bulk of the solution, and I've read the 800-page, $270 million budget the city's put out. There's a lot of vanity projects in there. I mean, we've got painting projects that are worth $100,000. That's one full-time officer's salary for a year, a well-paid senior officer's salary for a year. The bulk of the solution will have to come from a 10 to 20 full-time officer increase in hiring, which is about a $5 million upgrade to your budget. Like I said, I've looked at the budget. It's a very chubby budget, the one we have for Victoria. I believe by scrapping certain vanity projects, unnecessary infrastructure projects, and future bike lane enhancements, I can find $5 million for you guys to hire the staff that I believe you need, with which to form specified units that coordinate with bylaw and council, etc.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So moving on to the next discussion period, we'll go back to you. Oh, I see someone's hand up. Well, we'll give an opportunity. What we'll do after is we'll go back, but we'll give the opportunity for Sandy. Sandy, do you have any rebuttal for your group specifically? And then maybe we can go back and give everyone the opportunity overall. Sandy?
Okay, well, I can't believe I'm saying that, but I tend to agree with Mr. Issit. I hope I said his name right. I agree. We need substantially more than 22 beds, because if we talk about moving people or dispersing people, it's like, where do you put them? And we need, you know, beds for heads. So I agree with him. The complex care facility, couldn't agree more there. Alternative responders, yes, we do need that. And the amalgamated police service, which many have talked about, which is difficult because we need a collective agreement, which we cannot force. I guess Mr. Cardona,
It's Dr. Cardona, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
No, it's not Mr., it's Doctor. I have a PhD.
Oh, excuse me. Are you a surgeon?
I'm not. Carry on.
Okay, I probably, yeah. Okie dokie, Dr. Cardona. How about I just call you Jeremy for now? I just beg to differ with the crime stats, because I feel like that's quite disingenuous and watering it down. Are you negating the very real fear? When I go on the streets, and if you talk to constituents, I'm sure you have done, Victorian voters, they're telling me they are afraid. They feel fear. They are afraid. They have safety concerns. The empirical evidence, I live 2 blocks from Pandora. I go to that Save on Foods. People, I know women like me who are single, who drive all the way to Thrifty's in James Bay, even though it's only 2 blocks away, because they are too afraid to walk down Pandora. So are you negating that very real fear? Why are you bringing up this? Are you suggesting that hard crime is down? What about what the voters are telling us? What about the empirical evidence?
Ben, I'm just going to skip you for a sec, just to give Jeremy an opportunity to answer. Jeremy?
I'm happy to cede my time. Thanks, Tom.
Sure, okay. Ben?
Sure.
Directed at Jeremy, not Ben. I agree with Ben.
No, I know, Ben, the opportunity.
I'm happy to see alignment a little bit similar at council. I think people would see that when we reach across the aisle, and Jeff Young and I have worked extensively on a range of issues, and that's, I think, the philosophy we're going to need to solve these challenging issues. I do think we have to be clear on numbers. It was suggested that $100,000 would cover the costs of a police officer, and I think the statement was a senior officer. The figures we work with in the annual budget process is approximately $140,000 for the salary, benefits, and equipment of a junior to mid-range officer. When we look at the overall police budget of $64 million a year, that's 100 times the total budget for the city's community centers and senior centers. So perhaps a mural is a vanity project. I hear a lot of residents want to live in a community with some color and some life and arts. And the fact is, the police budget is by far the largest expenditure in the city. I think it does need to grow with inflation. But to suggest there's a lot of excess room in the budget, I think we would find thousands of citizens clamoring for those savings. So there's a bit of background noise, but
Tom, I think you have. You 1 sec. There you go.
And I'll just be about just the last couple seconds. I think the reality is, if we're going to grow the police budget beyond the rate of inflation, that will likely require tax increases, and that's a discussion we can have. But I think we just have to be realistic. Whoever's at the table after the election, there'll be some hard and realistic discussions that are going to have to occur.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Jeremy, would you like to add anything in terms of rebuttal or your comments made earlier directed to you?
No, I'm happy, Tom. I think I've said what I need to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Emmanuel,
Yes, I'd like to point out that the rate of retirement for police officers in Victoria Police Department right now, the rate of injury and the rate of simple quit is not keeping up to pace with the growth in our population, certainly not the growth in our homeless population or our criminal population. So to grow it at the rate of inflation is not going to keep up with it. Now, painted murals don't save lives, police do. I'm willing to prioritize the number one issue that the Downtown Victoria Business Association highlighted, the top 3 issues businesses have downtown who are now encountering an 8% vacancy rate and growing, is the all related to homelessness and specifically the criminal element of the homelessness. So I'll say it this way, and I'll pose a question directly to Ben Isaac, who in June of 2020, Councillor Isaac asked Police Chief Del Manick to consider or ponder the philosophical notion of quote unquote disbanding the police. This is from CTV. So I'm going to ask him directly, will you commit, I will, to a 10 to 20 officer hiring? The cost will be, again, I'm not a counselor. I don't see the budgets the way they do. I may be a little naive in my estimations, but whether it's 5, 6, 7, or $8 million that we need to find, I'm ranging my increase in police force 10 to 20 officers in the next budget cycle. Is Ben Isaac still in the defund police trip, or will he back up the idea of hiring substantially more officers?
I support increases in the police budget up to the rate of inflation. The police board hasn't yet submitted its 2023 budget to City Council. City Council doesn't write the budget, the police board does, and then it brings it to the councils of Victoria and Esquimalt for approval. For me, I do have trouble supporting increases beyond the rate of inflation, given all of the other demands on our community and the fact that the current model isn't working. Our police officers are on stress leave because they are not equipped or trained to respond to mental health crises. And we do have to conserve municipal resources to ensure specialists are hired who can appropriately respond to those social issues. So I think health problems in the community demand health responses, and health workers. Law and order issues do require police officers. So I'll commit today to supporting an increase up to the rate of inflation. I would need to see what the police board is proposing before being able to consider an increase beyond that amount.
Thank you, Ben.
You're
Chris
welcome.
Loughton, I know you had your hand up earlier, but would you like to go back to what you wanted to ask?
Yes, please, because Sandy challenged me, even though I'm not in this group. So I appreciate the time to rebut
Sure.
to Sandy's comments. So to start with, I wasn't talking about psychological needs. I was talking about physiological needs. What's that? Oh, I was talking about physiological needs like food, water, sleep, and safety, which corresponds with the Butler-Lepard report that just came out this past weekend. And that's the rapid investigation into repeat offending and random stranger violence in British Columbia. What they highlighted was a need for healthcare, housing, and access to food. And that's exactly what I'm saying. And for what does that look like in terms of action? Well, we have a wonderful example already happening here in Victoria, and that's Tiny Town. It's 30 units run by Our Place in North Park, and we need more of those. We need permanent spaces for people to be, where they have the right to sleep, the right to a safe sleep, access to food and water. I canvassed on Pandora today.
10 seconds.
People their basic physiological needs are not being met. That's where the problems are coming from. I have no idea what you're talking about heat lamps, but also a tent up on Pandora with you any day. It's after the campaign.
One of the mayoral candidates mentioned bringing in heat lamps with the oncoming cold weather.
Okay,
Not you, Chris.
okay. Well, it was directed towards me, so.
Sure. Thank you, Krista. So that does conclude group 3. We will give the opportunity now. Emmanuel, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, sorry, Ben had a couple goes. I'd like to be able to answer his question. The model of sending healthcare workers to emergency mental health causes was tried in the States in several cities, including Seattle, Washington. the net result, it's not being done anymore because the net result is these social workers are getting murdered.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And what I did want to finish off on is if anybody else wanted to make a rebuttal against someone else's group, now is the opportunity if you'd like to digitally put up your hand. If not, okay. Well, that concludes our first night debate specific to policing and public safety. So on behalf of the Victoria City Police Union, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I'd like to thank our candidates for assisting and helping out. And we hope you'll all join us tomorrow for the second half of the conversations. Everyone have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom.
Easy.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Are we still on?
Yeah, we're still here. Very
Maybe
nice.
Mr. Caradona can afford